Chair Rodriguez, you are now live.
Good afternoon. I'm Chair Tanya Rodriguez, and I would like to welcome you to the February 17th, 2022 Human Relations Commission virtual meeting. We are coming to you live from the Cherokee homelands, where the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians remain a sovereign nation to this day. We will now call our meeting to order. Duties of the Human Relations Commission of Asheville include, but are not limited to: 1. Make policy recommendations to the City Council which promote and improve human relations and advance equity in the city. 2. Support the city's Office of Equity and Inclusion. 3. Provide a forum where residents can raise issues and complaints relating to human relations in the city. 4. Engage the community regarding the utilization of city-funded programs and policies for the promotion of human relations. And 5, promote and improve human relations and advance equity in the following areas: public safety, education, art and cultural opportunities, economic development, health and human services, and housing. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we temporarily conduct our HRCA meetings remotely. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website, also linked to the Human Relations Commission page. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering meeting code 9723. Once again, that number is 855-925-2801. And the meeting code is 9723. For those of you who plan to speak during our live public comment today, you will need to hit *3 to be put in the speaker queue. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. Roll call. I will now go through and introduce all commission members, staff, and guests who are participating virtually. For our commission members, please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. When you have a question or would like to speak, click raise hand, and when recognized by the chair, unmute your microphone, please. Please remember to mute your microphone after you are done speaking. Commission members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. See list of members provided in the materials, pardon me. Reading on the script. All right, roll call. Chair here, Vice Chair Brandon Oliver.
Hello here.
Commissioner Daniel Young. Let's see who's here. Commissioner Noyes.
Hello, I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Harvey Harold.
I'm here.
Wonderful. Welcome. Commissioner Crystal Reed.
Hello, all. I'm here.
Welcome. Commissioner Amanda Bremseth?
Yes, is that Brimseth? Yeah, thank you.
Brimseth.
Yes, hi.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Dolores Venable.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Oh, that looks like we're here, and it does not look like we have quorum, so we will not be able to vote on our meeting minutes. Our council liaison just clicked in. Welcome, Councilwoman Rooney.
Good evening. Thank you for your service. I'm glad to be here with you today.
Wonderful as well. City staff members, Brenda Mills.
Good
And
evening,
Brad
everyone.
Good
Welcome.
evening,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you very much for being here today. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. Again, I ask committee members to click raise hand to be recognized to speak. Also state your name each time you comment. Just a reminder that the public is listening on the phone, and this keeps everyone up to date on the order of the meeting and who is commenting or speaking. And there still is no quorum. So moving on to staff updates. Staff updates, Brenda, please update us on the introduction of the Equity and Inclusion staff and the Reparations project.
You got it. Good evening, everyone. This is Brenda Mills, staff liaison. I'm going to start with the reparations first. We're waiting on another staff member who was doing a community meeting this afternoon to get him on the line. So we had interviews for the 18 applicants who were eligible to be considered by the city council on Tuesday. We got every one of them done from 1:30 to 5:15. Council was really brave. That was a long afternoon. Council will be submitting Boards and Commissions Committee will be submitting the 5 for the impact focus areas to council to approve on the 22nd. From that point, we do not know the schedule for the county commissioners, but we will be meeting with the city county team on Wednesday. We have a standing meeting every 2 weeks to get the schedule for that, and I will let you know more about that. We have excellent candidates. If you did not get a chance to see the interviews, you can go on public input, which is where your meetings are housed, and you can see all of those from last Tuesday afternoon. I am very proud and excited to introduce our new team members for Equity and Inclusion. We are fully staffed and excited about the work. Marcus Kirkman, who is at the bottom in the middle for me, is our training consultant. This young lady behind me with the mask is not a burglar. That is Elena Schmidt. She is our new analyst. And we're trying to get Darian on the phone, but Darian Blue is our outreach coordinator. So I'm going to let Marcus introduce himself, Elena, and hopefully by then we'll have Darian on the line. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone. I'll be very brief. Truly a pleasure to meet some of you for the first time, at least virtually. Some of you had the opportunity to meet in person from the staff, and others I look forward to meeting you. I am Marcus Kirkman, and I am the training consultant around equity and inclusion for the city. Truly grateful to be here and grateful to be of service. Thank you very much.
Hey y'all, I'm Elena. I use she, her pronouns. I have actually been with the city for 3 years, and then I came over in Parks and Recreation. Then I came over to work with Brenda, Marcus, and Darian in the Office of Equity and Inclusion, doing research and data analysis, and I'll be supporting y'all. So thank you.
Darren was having a community meeting. If he hops in, we'll let him introduce himself. So we are done. That's it for me for now.
Thank you, Brenda, and welcome and congratulations to all of you joining us in the HRCA team and the Office of Equity and Inclusion. We look forward to your collaboration and presence here. And if there's anything that I can help with, just let me know. Moving on to new business. There is no unfinished business. New business is the next item up for business. And And that brings us to Eric Jackson and Cameron Henshaw for our Office of Data and Performance presentation. Eric and Cameron, you have the screen.
All right, let me just bring up the presentation. All right, well, thank you all of you for your time tonight, giving us the opportunity to introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it, and hopefully how we can be a support for you as well as for the community and for other staff. My name is Eric Jackson. I manage the Office of Data and Performance. We're going on just under a year old. We'll have our anniversary next month, since we actually got staffed up. Normally, I would be doing this presentation together with one of our other staff members, Natalie Bailey, who is not able to make it here tonight, so I'm going to do my best to do both her parts and mine. But I'll also let Cameron introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Cameron Henshaw. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the performance analyst in the Office of Data and Performance. Glad to be here.
All right, so won't be taking a super long time, but I want to just kind of quickly go over what the office's mission and long-term goals are, a little bit about how we work and some of the things we're working on right now, and then kind of transition to how it applies to you, and hopefully some time for questions and discussions. So this is our mission statement: to empower the community and city staff to use data for equitable outcomes, accountability, and communication. And I want to kind of pull out a couple of points from that. And the first is that word empower. Really from the beginning, our mission has not been to become a service bureau where you come and get your data analysis, or we just hand over some data. Our role really is to help everyone in the city do a better job of using data in their decision making for accountability and for communication. And that's kind of the second thing I want to talk about is, what is this actually for? And it is very much to make sure that we're focused on outcomes, focused on the results we're trying to achieve, that those results are equitable, and that in general, that we're delivering the results that we commit to and ensuring that we do that in an equitable way. The other thing, in pretty much everything we do, we're kind of talking both about the decision making and the results, but also our communication around those. Because in our view, having kind of a common understanding of what the reality is and how we're doing is foundational to being able to do good communication, whether that be internally among staff or between the city and the community. And I think you'll see reflected in, hopefully you'll see that reflected in kind of our long-term goals. And our goals, and I'm going to kind of work up from the bottom, some of those goals have to do with the work of the office and the IT department where we sit themselves. Obviously, we need to maintain good systems to ensure that we have high quality data, that it's complete, and also that we have good governance processes in place to make sure that we're not inadvertently causing harm, either because we're trying to make decisions based on bad data or biased data, or because we're putting data out there that really needs to not be out there. So we want to make sure that we do that part. But two of our goals really are not for ourselves, they're for what's going to be true for other people, both staff and the community. For staff, we want to make sure that they have the capacity to use data to inform their own decision making and their communication around that, and that they're consistently focusing on the impact that our programs and services are having and on the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then on the community side, we want to make sure that people in the community understand what the city is doing, why it's doing it, and how we're, how well we're succeeding or not. And also, and I'll talk a little bit about this, are involved in helping define what success means. And I'll kind of get into a little bit of detail on all of that. So how do we work? And we think about our work basically in these kind of 4 buckets. On the public side, if we're going to be communicating about what we're doing and how, what progress we're making, there need to be kind of standard ways that we do that so people know what to expect, where to go, how to get that information in a consistent way. So we want to develop some standard ways of sharing out what's going on that are grounded in data. And I'll talk about one of the projects in a minute that we're using to try and build that. And then the other piece is, because we want to make sure that people are able to use the data, sorry, got myself confused. The second piece of that is, while staff may well be the experts in the resources required to deliver a service or accomplish something, and what the best strategy might be, if we're delivering a service or trying to achieve outcomes, it's the people who are most impacted by those services and outcomes who are the experts on whether we're succeeding. And so they need to be a part of helping define what that success means. And kind of finding some ways to do that is a core part of our work. We also want to make sure that the way the city makes decisions is grounded in some sort of objective data. One of the things that I discovered early on, I'm 5.5 years into my government service, kind of not where I spent most of my career, very quickly came to understand that if you want something to happen consistently within city government, it needs to be tied into a process. It needs to not be an extra thing that staff needs to remember to do. It needs to be part of the regular job that they do. And the premier process in city government is the annual budget. That's where we're deciding what resources we're going to bring to bear on the work, on the services and initiatives that we're undertaking. And so that's kind of where we need to build that decision-making activity in. There are other processes where we're trying to do that as well, but the premier one and where we're focusing our attention this year is on the budget process. And of course, if we want staff to make good decisions using data, we need to teach them how to do that. So a lot of our work is about capacity building. We have a series of classes. I think we've got about 6 classes that we're running this year over the course of the year. We also do consulting with departments, and part of our philosophy in that consulting is to make sure that we're not only facilitating a process, but also teaching people while we're doing it how to do that process on their own, and where appropriate, leaving behind some tools, so that too is kind of training. And then we also have things like an internal newsletter that goes out a couple times a month, and a discussion channel. And then again, one of the important points here is we're a team of 3. We can't do all the data-driven decision-making for the whole city, nor can we even take on all of the capacity building. And so part of what we want to do is empower other, as people learn how to do this, allow them to help their colleagues. And so to that end, for example, we have an internal collaboration group that meets monthly where people can bring challenges and share them with their colleagues and get their colleagues kind of help and perspective on how to address those challenges. And then the fourth is, of course, governance. I won't go on about that, but it is foundational. You can't have data-driven decision-making if you don't have good data, or you don't have the data at all. And so you need everything from automated systems that are kind of making sure that the data is up to date, to the processes and procedures that make sure that you've got high quality, that the data is not inaccurate or biased in any way, and then also making sure that you have processes and checks in place to prevent malicious use of data, but also to prevent accidental harm, simply because of a misunderstanding around what the data is, or inadvertently putting data out that needs to not be out. I could talk for a long time about any one of these initiatives. I want to kind of highlight some of the things that we're working on this year. One of the things we do is kind of work with departments and programs to help them either, use data better in their own work or to share that data better. One of you may have seen in the news recently, we just helped our homeless initiative folks put out a homeless point in time count dashboard. That has the 2021 data. It will be updated with the 2022 data as soon as that count is available. And between now and then, we're working with them to put out some of the standard performance measures that they collect around homelessness, so that we're doing a better job of just regularly updating the community on kind of the progress or the status of the efforts that are going on, and also working with them to start thinking through where to build from there. For the reparations process, early on, we got involved in just gathering a baseline set of data to hand over to the commission that'll form and the project team that they can use to start their work. And then we're kind of ready to continue providing support to the equity department and the project team and commission with getting additional data, helping to analyze the data that we have, and just better ways to present that data as that seems helpful. And then we partner with other equity. I would say that well over half of the work we do has an intersection in some way, shape, or form with equity. And so we're actually super excited that we have Brenda on board, that she actually has staff to be able to do the work, and we'll be working with them on all of the initiatives. We're really looking forward to being able to support their work. Some of the other work we're doing, we've been pretty heavily involved in the American Rescue Plan, ARPA, or American Rescue Plan Act funding process. Our role so far has been on building good rubrics for the evaluation of the request for proposal responses that came in that are now in City Council's hands to work on. And then on the back end, we're working to build a good framework for managing the performance of the awardees, because what we want to make sure of is that we're providing good support to them in making sure that they're able to succeed in the projects that they've taken on, and that the community and the city are able to benefit from that. We're working, our focus on the current budget process is on having a more, losing my words, having a more systematic way of doing evaluations of capital projects, accounting for kind of all of our key priorities, including equity, which we've woven through that process, and then doing a deeper dive working with equity and the budget team on evaluating kind of equity impacts for capital projects. And then, as I said, one of the things we want to do is have standard ways of reporting out progress. And so we're working with planning and urban design right now to kind of create a framework initially on the website, but then that becomes the foundation for other communications of just regular reporting out on where we are with council priorities, the long-term comprehensive plan, starting with a basic baseline on where we are in the comp plan and City Council's current year priorities. And then, as I talked through earlier, basic capacity building for staff, the governance functions around quality, data automation, and so on. And probably unusually for an IT department, we were very focused on our external. As we said, part of our role here is to make sure that the community is able to use data for their own advocacy, as well as hold the city accountable. And so that's part of why we're here tonight. We want people to know what we're doing, how we're trying to be a resource to them, as well as to city staff. And this is the part where Natalie would be doing much more of the talking, since she is our community engagement specialist, but she has been conducting ongoing conversations with neighborhood leaders, community group leaders, talking about where they see best ways for communicating out progress, what's, kind of perceptions of city services, and how we can better communicate around that. And we've also done, for example, we did a listening session with our Kayla students, the City of Asheville Youth Leadership Academy students who were working with us last summer, I believe, and did a focus session with them, kind of learning from the youth perspective about city communication, particularly using data, as well as where the issues are that they're concerned. And I have to say that was one of the most fun things I've been involved in quite a while. They definitely are our up and coming youth, up and coming generation of leaders. So, what does this all have to do with you? And as we think about, trying to change the way the city does what it does and to make data available to the community to use for their own advocacy, we need to have some common language and common ways of thinking about how we're going to do that. And so we want to adopt a basic framework that we can share for how we're going to focus on outcomes, determine whether we're making progress to those outcomes, and deciding what we're going to do. What we've adopted in the city is something called results-based accountability, or often referred to as RBA. And there's kind of three reasons why we went with the results-based accountability framework. And the first was, and the reason we even discovered it in the first place, is it is the foundation for the Racial Equity Toolkit that comes from the Government Alliance on Racial Equity that the city is using, and that we're actually working with Equity to currently apply in the budget process. So RBA is the foundation of the GARE Racial Equity Toolkit. It's also pretty well adopted regionally as well as nationally. Its earlier adoption here was around healthcare, but as it gone into education, the county is using it. And so that was a good reason to standardize on it. And the most important reason from my perspective is that it's really simple and kind of common sense, common language focused. What we don't want is a framework that's complicated to learn, either because we don't want staff to waste their time learning a bunch of jargon and so on, and we certainly don't want to impose that on the community. RBA is really kind of a simple process grounded in some basic questions. There's nothing complicated about the process. It is hard because doing things well and really thinking through how you're going to do it is hard, but it is not complicated. The full RBA process is 7 questions. We tend to focus on these kind of 5 steps, 4 questions and a 5th step that are a slightly simplified version of it. We start by focusing on the results we want to achieve. How do we want our community, or if it's a city service, our customers, how do we want them to be better off, and what does that mean? And that's obviously the point at which engaging with the people who are receiving those services or impacted by that initiative is really important in defining what success means. How do we want them to be better off? Then we need to decide and agree on how we're going to tell. And that's the performance measures. How are we going to know if we're actually succeeding? If we have no objective way to measure whether the things we say we're going to do are being done or are being accomplished, then we're very unlikely to be able to make good progress. And one of the things I find really interesting about RBA is it's standard in performance to say we need a baseline. We need to know where we are. RBA takes that one step further and says we need to know where we are, and we also need to know what to expect if we don't do anything different. So we want to think, what's the trend going to be if we don't change what we're doing? Is it going to stay the same? Is it going to get worse? If it's going to get better, maybe we don't actually need to take action. Probably if we're talking about it, something is not grand, and so we do want to do something. But if we kind of know what to expect in the trend going forward, we can focus less on targets and more on what it means to actually improve. If the curve is going this way, how do we turn that curve in the direction that we want to turn it? So that establishing baselines is, what's the curve that we want to turn and improve? And then we go into the actual strategies. Now that we know what we're trying to accomplish, how we're going to tell if we're accomplishing it, and kind of how to measure what we're measuring that against, then we can decide what to do, and then cycle back after we have implemented our strategies for a few weeks or months or whatever it might be. Let's come back and say, are we still, we might have learned something where we really need to refine our definition of what we're trying to accomplish. Or we may need to get some better ways of measuring it. But certainly we want to come back and ask ourselves, how are we doing? Is it good enough? And if not, what are our next steps? How do we want to change what we're doing in order to improve the process? And I would say that everything we're trying to embed in the city is about embedding learning processes rather than kind of rigid, get the data, that'll tell you the answer. It's figure out what you're trying to accomplish, what data will help you tell if you're accomplishing it, and then go into that iterative cycle of learning. Since we rarely get the strategy right the first time, we need to be able to come back and change up. These are things, like these questions are things that you can use in your work in this on this commission. Encourage you to ask yourselves these questions as you think about what you're trying to accomplish. Certainly, we would encourage you to ask them of staff. So this is, now you know that kind of this is how we as a city want to be thinking about our work and held accountable for the work. Hold us to it. And then the third way is, the more that we can start to build a common language and common way of thinking about these things across our community, the better. So these are things that you can use in your own lives and in your own communities as well. So that's kind of my quick overview of the Office of Data and Performance and what we're doing. We will share this presentation with Brenda to share out with you, and there are links to our webpage, which we keep updated monthly. We have a quarterly newsletter that you can sign up for if you like, and at any point we would love for you to kind of reach out, and if you've got questions or comments or anything else, we would love to hear from you either directly or through Brenda. And with that, I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions. It was a bit of a whirlwind through.
Hey, how you doing? I have a few questions. Thank you, Eric. Some questions. I really appreciate what you're doing, and it's a big job and a huge effort. So thank you very much. The whole screen just froze, so I don't know if you can hear me. I can
hear you.
Mute myself and come back again. Just okay. There, everybody's back. So with a capacity building, what does staff capacity mean? How are you defining staff capacity? Second question, governance. Build systems, within build systems, how and what protections are you or do you have in place to ensure those systems are equitable and accessible? I heard that you wanted to prevent people from accessing data that maybe they don't need to have access to. Well, what are you putting into place to make sure that people can access the data that they need to access? Next question is equity and capital projects. I posted the White House executive order for racial equity because I noticed that you put in, we wanted to create a shared narrative in your last slide. So bringing in a shared narrative about equity within capital projects to make sure that equity isn't confused with diversity or inclusion, to maybe invite that in. And are you going to be doing an environmental equity report to create that baseline of data within the city?
Okay, so I'm going to try and answer all the questions, and then if I've missed something, please point me back to whatever I missed. Sort of working backward, environmental equity, there is some work there. In fact, I think recently there was an environmental justice kind of analysis that went out, an environmental justice index that was done between the sustainability office, the equity office, and our geographic information systems division in IT. So that is starting that work, and I believe they are currently doing a gap analysis. One of the things I would say, maybe kind of combining two of your questions, as we are looking this year at capital projects, we're doing kind of two pieces. One is, how do we decide on kind of the narrow down the universe of what we're gonna really consider? Because there are needs that go far, far beyond what might be funded in any given year. So how do we kind of narrow that list in a way that makes sense, and where we have a systematic way of thinking about that? The process and tool that we've designed there is looking at two aspects. One is impact, and the other is kind of urgency. To bring in equity, one of the things we learned actually in the process of doing the American Rescue Plan Act process is, if you make equity a category, it's really easy to accidentally end up with things that score really highly on everything but equity, score really badly on equity, and then kind of get through because they have a high score. And so what we've deliberately done is woven equity through, in this case, both categories. It actually comes up in three ways, because it does come in through the environmental justice aspect as well. So that you really can't do super badly on equity, but still get a high score. So that's just thinking systematically, how do you make sure that's true? The second part we're doing on the capital improvements project, we just had a meeting earlier today with Brenda and Elena and the folks that are working on this, is bringing the racial equity toolkit to bear on a specific capital project, and this is a bit of a pilot this year, to really work through the questions to see, one, what are the impacts, and once we've named the impacts, what are the strategies we're using to mitigate them? And I think it's very much in the spirit of the executive order, of making sure that we have a systematic way to ask all the questions. I'm not sure if I've adequately answered that part of the question, so let me pause and let you tell me if I have.
Let me just anchor the question a little bit more succinctly.
Okay.
Since equity is an analysis of policy and practices in the city, in city policy, equity is in analyzing policy and practices of city policy for adverse impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to choose which policy has the most impact? how much staff are you utilizing in this, and what's the timeline for the data? Because there's oftentimes people confuse equity with diversity, and don't realize that equity within what you're doing is in data collection lives in the analysis of policy and the adverse impacts those policy may have on people within the city, in the city and outside of the city. Halls. So what is the timeline on an analysis like that? And is that something that your office is doing? Because I'm concerned with the simple process grounded in simple questions. Each of those bullet points to me felt not based in equity and are rife with inequitable potentialities. So what are you going to put into place to make sure that this analysis that you're, it sounds like a huge job, is going to be grounded in equity, in the adverse impact of potential inequitable policy and practices within the city?
So you are right. It is a huge job, and it's certainly not one that we can even pretend as an office to be doing. This is everything we do is in partnership. So, for example, well, let me start with the actual RBA piece that you just brought up. You're right. You can do that. You can answer those questions without regard to equity and come up with measurements and strategies that continue to do damage easily. One of the things, the reason we got to RBA is not because it in and of itself doesn't, it prevents that, but because it was the foundation for the racial equity toolkit that brings in the layer of questions that says, what's the history? What are the adverse impacts? How do they work? And then how are we going to either prevent or mitigate them? That analysis, just to be honest, is hard and does require a lot of thought. So part of what we're trying to do is, in partnership with the Equity and Inclusion Department, the Budget Office, in this process is, and we have a student from Western Carolina helping, is to start building tools that help us walk through that, find the places that are going to be hard for people for whom this is new, and build the support structures around that. We've got quite a bit of data that we can use and share with departments. Applying that data and the analysis is something that we need to make easier for departments to do. Everything we're doing, we see on as a process. We can't change everything in the way that the city works all at once. We're trying to teach people how to do this better. And so bringing these improved ways of doing things into particular points of the process, proving it out. So our pilot project this year around using the racial equity toolkit, which does ask all those questions very specifically in that process. One of the things I've seen, let me kind of step back for a second. We can take something like the racial equity toolkit, do a 1 or 2 hour training on it, and put it out there and ask people to use it. Whether it's that or RBA by itself or anything else, my observation is that tends not to work because people really don't, it's less a question of knowledge and more a question of kind of learning the process and having the discipline to kind of stick to it and work through the hard questions. And so figuring out where those sticking points are and then building tools and supports for it is a core part of the work that we're trying to do this year with equity, while performing the analysis wherever we're actually trying to do it. Is that making any sense at all? Let me just
I
pause.
hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much. Commissioner Noyes, your hand was up first, and then Commissioner DeVenable.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Eric, for being here. I have a question about our houses community. You had mentioned that it is this department that takes a number of unsheltered people annually, and that you collect data about our unsheltered folks in other ways as well. I did see that there is a request for a consultant to apply to further kind of gather data and then make a report and recommendations to the city on how to best help our unsheltered folks. I was just wondering, how is that different from what y'all are doing? Like, what is the difference in work, and why is the city asking for a consultant instead of this department doing it?
So again, one thing I want to really emphasize, we're 3 people serving all of the departments in the city, and we're not specialists in, for example, homelessness or equity itself or the fire department or anything else. Our role is to help those specialists do their job. So for example, with the homelessness efforts, we can bring in 2 kinds of expertise. We can bring in expertise around how best to think about presenting that data, and we can bring in expertise around what are the methodologies for doing the analysis. How do we think about what discipline do we bring about thinking about outcomes and then kind of working back from there and measuring success. We're not experts on what the right solutions are. And so I would go to our homeless initiative folks, and if they've decided that having an outside consultant is the best way to approach those questions, that's entirely appropriate, because that would be outside of our expertise. Our expertise is more generally around how do you work with data? How do you kind of think generally about outcomes and measuring progress toward those outcomes in a disciplined way? Generally across any sort of initiative, it's more of a thinking process. And I want to get back to the question about the data governance piece. It's more about how you think through that process than being a specialist in the subject area and the data around that subject area itself. One thing I would say, just in terms of data governance, we have so there are multiple layers. If we're going to release a data set, for example, and I'll give you one specific example. We have data on employees on our open data portal with salaries and positions, and that data has actually been out there for years, long before this office was formed. We have since begun putting in place a much more deliberate process of asking what the potential harms are of any of the data that goes out there. And looking at that, we realized that we were putting out information on first names that were legal first names rather than preferred first names, and thereby not necessarily putting out information that was aligned with the gender identification of people on staff. And so we are in the process of building internal processes, working with HR to make sure that the names that are published are the preferred names, to make sure that people have control over what that information is. Until that time, we've pulled that first name and are no longer publishing it, since there was a potential to do harm by putting it out there. So that kind of question is one where we're putting process in place to ask the question up front rather than discovering it later because of harm done, which is the last thing we want to do. Having those standard questions, again, using things like the Racial Equity Toolkit in the process of data release is one of the things we can do. The other thing we can do, very often you will make a change in one place in a system that has an impact on data that's being used someplace completely different. And so the people doing the one change and the people doing the other change are different and don't necessarily know about each other. So we are in the process of building systems that kind of capture those dependencies and are able to allow us to say, this change may affect that data. Is there anything that we need to be concerned about there? And again, to go through just a standard list of questions to make sure that we're thinking about the potential for doing harm.
Okay, thank you. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but I'll let Dolores ask her question.
Can y'all hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for your work. Thank you, Melanie, for giving me some time to speak for a second. Very quickly, one of the things that I want to ask a question to, and make a statement upon. So I really do appreciate, again, Ashley trying to take the time to do data analysis, because we do need that, because it's part of a truth and reconciliation process that we need to have here in the city as well. But I really do feel like some of the truth and reconciliation processes are part of lived experiences. And one of the things that I like about the stints is that you take people from communities and you let them go to places. And the best way to work the census is you get people who can go out here and collect data from people that they actually know, live in communities with, and have the truth about them. So I'm wondering if this is something that the city of Asheville is prepared to do in that position with several groups of people, because in order to be able to change the dynamics and the situations of people, we have to know their lived histories, their lived stories, their experiences. I do believe in data collection as far as governmental entities. I do believe in collecting data from algorithms and such, but we do need to be able to have a person-to-person in-touch approach here in Asheville, and able to be able to change some of the dynamics that have happened here over the decades and sometimes centuries of hurt, harm, trauma, financial, and just everything that you can think of that hurts human beings. So I would like to know if your department is also willing to be able to maybe use some things like Black college students who go to HBCUs that need college credit in order to, graduate or be able to have experiences, to be able to go collect person-to-person data, to go out in these neighborhoods they grew up in, they lived in, and their families lived in, people of every type of ancestry, be it Native American, be it Hispanic, be it whatever, homelessness. We need to be able to give people opportunities to talk to the people that they recognize and know the most. So I'd like to hear more about how your office is going to be able to, or is willing to be able to facilitate that type of conversation within the community. Thank you again.
So that's, before I answer the specific question, I think I just want to clarify one thing. When I use the word data, that tends to bring to mind numbers only. And I do want to emphasize that when I say the word data, that includes a really important category of data, which is narrative data. They're good for different kinds of purposes, but both are really important. There's kind of numerical data, narrative data, and the context around that. So to your specific question, I think that is something that we are very interested in facilitating a conversation around. There are some kinds of data collection that are just highly technical, particularly if it's internal administrative systems. Those are pretty straightforward. If we're trying to measure the impact on communities, then engaging with those communities to understand that impact is really critical. And you're absolutely right. how you gather that information has all kinds of issues with it, from who is it that is in the process of collecting that data. Some people are going to be trusted, other people are not. And then building guarantees around what the use of that data is, so that people can be confident of that there are controls in place, or that they really understand how the data is going to be used. So yes, just to repeat, on anything that we're doing, we're partnering with a department in some way, or a community group, or somebody to do it. We're not trying to do all this ourselves, but facilitating that kind of conversation is very interesting, and absolutely interested in doing that.
Thank you so much for your response. I do understand this is a very layered situation. These are things that a lot of cities have not done yet, and we're starting to start conversations here in Asheville that are very pivotal to starting conversations across our state and across our country. So I do respect people taking the time and initiative to be able to do things. I just want to make sure it's very inclusive and not leaving people out that have not had a seat at the table yet, that suffer from the same, sometimes, data that has been kind of miscrewed towards groups or individuals. So I do appreciate your response, and I do believe that you all are looking for a better way. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Venable. And Eric, we've got another question. Commissioner Noyes?
Yeah, I have a question that has a few parts. One, is there any Black, Indigenous, or people of color in your department? And if not, like, what is the plan for reaching out to Black, Indigenous, or people of color to help interpret the data?
So, and unfortunately, particularly for that question, Natalie Bailey was not able to be with us tonight. Natalie is Black, native of Asheville. So we have a Black woman in our team, and otherwise it's me and Cameron. Obviously, with 3 people, we can't represent all the groups. So even though we do have some representation, I think it's really important that on all of this, that's part of why there needs to be a community component in defining success, in interpreting success, in deciding, depending on what it is, it may be in terms of deciding strategies. So part of what we're trying to do, and I think in collaboration with equity and inclusion, because this is very much caught up in how we change the way we do things so that we are no longer having the kinds of negative impacts that we've had historically, bringing in the tools and the frameworks that allow us to think differently about how we do that, including making sure that we're involving community at critical parts of the process, from the formulation of what the questions are, through collection of data, through decision about strategies, and so on. Now, obviously, we're not in charge of all those things. We are working to kind of build supports in partnership with equity and others to be able to do that better as an organization.
Thank you very much, Eric and Commissioner Noyes. Dolores, Commissioner De Venable, would you like to share another question?
No, I was going to share a statement. Natalie Bailey and I actually graduated from Asheville High School in the same class in 1996. So it was very refreshing to see that she was put in that position with your office. So that's a really great thing too, that lets us know that as locals also, that we have a chance to be able to work within the city that we were raised in. So I really do respect that aspect of the conversation as well. So thank you for adding that on as well, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or clarifications I can obviously, and I do want to emphasize that what we're working on is, just as with Equity and Inclusion Department, what we're working on is a pretty significant culture change within the organization. And so all of our thinking, there are certain things we can do quickly, other things we're really trying to think through how to embed the changes in the way things are done. And that's a slower process. And by the way, I am happy, any questions that come later, I am happy to continue answering questions either through the staff liaison, or if you just want to email ODEP directly, that we're happy to answer that way as well.
Thank you very much, Eric. I do have one more. You going to ensure that the Office of Equity and Inclusion has a strong voice in your data collection and your data process to make sure that the equitable protections are in place so that things are done in an equitable way?
So I will speak to that partly, and then in the end, it's up to Equity and Inclusion to say whether we're succeeding in doing that. So we do have, sort of unusually for a city program, we have a governance team that, so we live inside of a department, we're part of the IT department, and that lives in the hierarchy as just as with any other division. In addition, we have a cross-departmental governance team that includes everybody from the city attorney. Brad Branham is on that team. We have representation from the city manager's office, a variety of departments, and we always have somebody from Equity, and we're really excited now to have Elena as part of the board that oversees our work. With Brenda is invited to all the meetings as well, but she's always invited to way more meetings than she could possibly do. So that's one way, but the other way, so for example, in the work that we're doing on the budget, Elena is part of the team that's looking at the, applying the racial equity toolkit to capital projects. Part of why we're so excited about having Equity and Inclusion staffed up is we're very focused in trying to apply those principles ourselves, but we need help. And so being able to have the staff who can participate and be at the table through all of these is really important to us. And I think we do reasonably well at making sure that we're letting folks in Equity know when we're up to something so that they can weigh in. We waited until everybody was on board, but sent out a list to everybody on the Equity team of all the projects ODEP is in that we think might be of relevance to Equity, and invited them to kind of name the ones where we really, really need you here. But also here are all the other things. So you may want to be involved, or at least we'll keep you informed. So that's kind of our approach to making sure that Equity and Inclusion is involved in everything we do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Commissioner Noyes Espinoza. And thank you, Commissioner Venable, for bringing in those really tough questions. And Eric, you're a champ. You did it. You made it through the HRCA.
I'll be honest. Part of the culture change we're trying to bring is to welcome challenge, because it's the only way we learn. So I really appreciate your taking the time. If, I don't know if my answers are satisfying you or not, that's fine. Keep challenging us. Keep challenging the rest of city staff. That's actually the only way we're going to get the improvement that we need. So I appreciate your time tonight so much.
Thank you very much. And if you please could place your email in the chat so that we all have access to it for this meeting. And
Chair Rodriguez, chat is turned off. This is a public meeting.
okay,
And all stuff needs to be, so when I send the presentation, or Eric can send the presentation, I'll make sure you get the contact information.
wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That last slide has our group address and my address.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Eric. Is there anything that Cameron would like to add before we wrap your presentation? Do you feel complete?
No, it was really great to hear all of your questions. I feel like Eric was saying, it's just wonderful to hear those challenging questions. And I feel like Eric always puts a lot of effort into answering them. So yeah, thank you for letting me be here and listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Thank you very much, Eric. Is there anything else you would like to add before we move on to our next item up for business?
No, I will let you go on to the rest of your evening. Thank you so much for allowing us the time to be here.
We're glad you're here doing the work. Keep on keeping on. Brenda?
I just want to advise you that Darian Blue has joined us. If we could let him introduce himself, that would be great. Thank you.
Welcome to the meeting, Darian. You have the screen.
All right, thank you very much. Before I introduce myself, I just want to say, man, that was a lot of great information, a lot of great questions that were asked, and that was very informative. Darian Blue, working directly under Ms. Brenda Mills in the Office of Equity and Inclusion, with a focus on community engagement and outreach. Been doing this work for close to 20 years now. Florida to Georgia to South Carolina, even out of the country. And so I am really excited to be a part of such a wonderful group, a wonderful team, just to really help see this vision come to pass. And so I'm here for however any of you need me, and just really excited to be here. So thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to introduce myself, Ms. Brenda. Thank you.
Welcome, Darian. This really powerful team that Brenda's putting together for the Office of Equity and Inclusion for the City of Asheville. Next item up for business are committee updates, commission updates. These are key actions from our retreat. And in this item of business, I'll be calling on a representative from each committee that we created during the HRCA retreat to just get an update on what's going on in the committee, on the working group. Also, working group committee is a term that I'll be using interchangeably. So within these working groups that were created during the HRCA retreat, I'm just going to bring up some updates in that. So our first working group committee, intergovernment relations, in that working group is Alex, Tiffany, me, and Brandon. And so far there has been no action yet as of yet within that working group. Our next working group is community engagement, which consists of Suzie Chandler, Commissioner Chandler, who is on leave, me, Tiffany, Yvonne, and Harvey. And I haven't seen an email. Commissioner Harold, do you have any updates on the community engagement working group?
Commissioner Tanya, I have been working, solely on my own, but I have a lot of my own notes on community engagement, and I would love to share them with you and my rest of my group as well. But I haven't been associated with anybody else. but I would love to get in touch with somebody else.
Awesome. Would you be interested in setting up a meeting so that we can talk about what's going on within your notes, and then we can bring to the HRCA actionable items that we can work on together? Is that something that would interest you, Commissioner?
I would love it, Tanya. I would love it.
All right, you're on. I'll send you an email right after the meeting.
That's a bet. Thank you.
Thank you. The next working group is addressing housing issues, which is Commissioner Chandler, who is not present right now, so on leave, me, and Commissioner Noyes Espinoza. Are there any updates on the houselessness housing issues working group?
Hey there. Yeah, it was my intention to start doing some research on sanctuary camping and some numbers and data that comes along with that. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to it yet. But our homelessness initiative, I don't know if I'm saying the name of that group correctly, but as I mentioned earlier, they're on the search for a consultant to gather some more data on our houseless community in Asheville. And I think the deadline for that is sometime mid-March, and then they'll be announcing who the consultant is by April, end of April, I believe. But in the meantime, I do still think personally and from other community leaders in town that sanctuary camping should still be a priority. And I do plan on presenting some information to y'all very soon about that. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Noyes Espinoza. Our next working group update is examining systems. That working group consists of Commissioner Harvey, Commissioner Venable, and Commissioner Young. Are there any updates for the examining systems working group? Commissioner Venable. Commissioner Venable, you had your hand up.
Sorry. Hi, folks. Can you hear me? Hey. One of the things that I've noticed is that we're having a lot of things changing in the dynamics within our city governance and our systems as well. So I had sent an email out asking folks to just let's sit back for a second and see what's going on within our own systems so that we can be able to gauge what might be next steps. So I think within our own self, we've been pretty quiet because we're trying to watch and learn before we jump to conclusions. Because I think sometimes people can get misconstrued with words and interference. So I just chose to sit back on this one and watch what was going on with some other things that's going on systemically within our city, and what's going on with other things within our own governance. That's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Venable. For our next working group update, we have improving HRCA, which consists of Commissioner Venable and Commissioner Young.
On behalf of that one, to sitting back watching to see what's going on right now, because there's certain things that's going on within other systems and systemics that we don't necessarily as a board have the ability to control. We can talk to members, we can try to see what's going on as far as community, but it's better to see what is going on as far as the feel from our governing board. And we haven't had a lot of opportunity to talk with each other. It's been very brief as well. I think now that the mask mandate is over, that it might be a conversation that hopefully City Council has along with other, because county commissioners meet in person. So I think once this mask mandate has been dropped as it has, that we might have an opportunity to meet in person, be able to hash some things out more in person than it is behind closed doors. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Venable. Commissioner Harold?
Yes, okay. Yes. Going back to examining the systems, I had a chance to talk to Commissioner Venable last night. Is Commissioner Young here tonight?
No, he's not here tonight.
Okay, because I had a lot of things on that and would love to get in touch with him as well. I have an outlet to Commissioner Venable, as I said. Okay, that's the only thing I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Harold. And that completes our item of business for working group updates. Next item up for business are community announcements. Are there any community announcements the commissioners would like for the City of Asheville to know of? Commissioner Venable and then Commissioner Reed.
I'm sorry, my hand was accidentally raised. I left it on from before. I'm so sorry. My bad.
You're good. It's all good. Thank you very much. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I apologize because I am playing a little bit of catch up. However, I'm savvy at doing so. Just wanting to say that I have, in the past 6 months, stepped up engagement across the Housing Authority for the City of Asheville as the communication liaison, looking at a lot of interesting points as we pivot towards this new year. They are starting to talk about the voucher programs and things that will be changing throughout this next year and getting the information out. So Housing Authority is doing a very good job at getting that information out. I myself have been working with them to help people understand the changes that are getting ready to take place. And that is giving us hope to stop the homelessness in our communities as well. Environmental safety being a key in this all. The quality of living as well. So those are some key points that we are working with through the resident council to communicate with other residents, peer residents, and community liaisons. I myself am not a part of any of these community groups. However, I would very much so be interested in participating, as my information is made public on all of the information that was sent out in the PDFs. So thank you for allowing me to address those things this evening.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Reed. There in your email that Brenda sent out is this list of the different working groups and everything like that. So take a look at all of the different working groups and the things that we discussed during the retreat and find which one you got it. That's the one. And find which one that speaks to you the most. And if a few do, reach out to the people that you see in the working group and connect and, bring your wisdom and your expertise in there. We're glad that you're here. Finally. Been looking forward to it. Councilwoman Rooney.
I believe Dolores has a hand up first.
Commissioner Venable.
Hey, thank you, folks. I appreciate you, Councilman Roney, for recognizing me as well. This is a question for, I guess, for Councilwoman Roney and also Brad, maybe. What's the likelihood that since the mask mandate has been lifted here in Buncombe County, and that also, we have new CDC recommendations, what's the likelihood that we could have maybe, and I know this is a really kind of layered question to ask, because I do think we do better work sometimes when we're amongst each other, because we can actually be, I just believe that communities meet better when you're in the community that you're meeting in, and you see people and you talk to people and you be around people. The retreat was such an awesome vibe. And so I want to get back to that in some kind of ways. And we're still at that, not saying that we've lost anything, but just saying that it's just great to have that type of vibe and energy with each other and be around each other and have the same type of, momentum that we have as people in everyday life. So what do you think might be the likelihood of us meeting in person soon? I guess this is like a hypothetical question, but I was just wondering because I see county commissioners are meeting. And I'm wondering like how soon. Maybe.
So thank you for that question, Dolores. That ties in with the announcement that I was going to make, is that our city council meeting will be in person at the Civic Center in the banquet hall this coming Tuesday at 5 o'clock. That's Tuesday, February 22nd. And before that, our budget work session, the first budget work session of the cycle, will be in person as well. Perhaps our staff could speak to if there are expectations of when our advisory boards would also be returning to in-person. I am not familiar with exactly what the phasing would look like, and I wouldn't want to give it misinformation.
Yeah, I can probably speak to that, Councilwoman Roney, and thank you for your question, Commissioner Venable. The short answer is we're not 100% sure, but we do now plan to begin phasing in the boards and commissions back to an in-person setting now that the city council is returning to in-person. So very similar to what you're seeing with what the county is doing, you are going to begin seeing the city slowly transition back as we see appropriate and as conditions allow. Now, some of that is going to be dependent upon the technology, because we want to be able to continue to provide access to those members of our community that want to have the ability to comment, to watch these meetings in conditions that they feel safe and secure in. But more than likely what you're going to see is following the city council over the next couple of months. First, you're going to see city council committees, and then some of the what we'll call the statutorily required boards and commissions, the ones that are created by state statute, move to in-person, followed by all of the boards and commissions in a rolling process. So expect that all to be rolling out over the next couple months. And as we firm up that schedule, we're going to release that to the public and all the boards and commission members so they can see exactly what to expect.
Well, thank you so much to the both of y'all. That really just gave my face a whole smile, made me get through Friday easy. So that's wonderful. It's glad to hear, because I think people do really work better when we're in a situation where we're working together instead of working in these different places and spaces that we really don't have a chance to get to know each other and it just meet on. And it's been so great here with our board because we've been able to go through this for a long period of time. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to all get back together. Again, just like the retreat, keep that energy up and keep it moving. So I'm really glad about that. So thank you so much, Brad and Kim, for your responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Venable. Moving on to our next item up for business. Are there any more community announcements? Wonderful. Our next item up for business is live public comment. Brenda, do we have anybody in the queue?
Madam Chair, we have no one in the queue. We did not receive any updates or emails at this time.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Next item up for business is future agenda items, training in city mandated equity inclusion process, collaboration with city to create a complaint form from residents to city, accountability pipeline for complaints process for City of Asheville to city employees and resident complaints, LGBTQIA discrimination protections and complaints process, which has already been established. We still need to check into a little bit more of that. ADA compliance and complaints process, working on that. Creation of volunteer mentorship program to support returning citizens. Public safety, fair and equitable housing, and environmental climate concerns. Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Reed. At this time, our next item up for business is adjournment. We do not need to call for a vote. If there is no other business, we will adjourn. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you for all of your service and input, and keep on showing up and keeping it real. Thank you very much, City of Asheville. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Councilwoman Rooney. Thank you all to the commissioners. Thank you, City of Asheville. Take it easy and be well.